cups of coffee, so I'm excited and ready to go. So with that, let's hit the ground running. As I alluded to a minute ago, I guess background on myself, I've been with Lightspeed now almost 12 years. I've living in Austin currently. I lived in London and worked with my colleague Richard, who's on the phone today with us, calling in from London. And there's so many things that are different about education worldwide, but really there's so many things that are the same, right? And so we're very fortunate to be an international company, and I work from 3 a.m. Austin time till Richard knows this, sometimes 10 p.m. Austin time, so supporting our APAC customers. And so we've really seen over the last year some scary trends, and you see those statistics there. We'll talk about specific features like content filtering and classroom management, and you may even hear a little bit about device management and analytics. Really, our focus is the well-being of students and helping educators manage devices to stop these scary stats you're seeing here. Cyberbullying, inappropriate behavior, things that we probably all were exposed to and did as students. And we didn't have this sort of technology. And so really the goal for us is to help you with online learning, especially as we've seen through the last year with the pandemic, all this distance learning that's needed to happen. It was very easy for a long time when devices never left school, right? You could control them, you could keep the students safe, but as soon as they left and were out of the classroom, you literally did not have eyes on the devices, right? And so you lost visibility into how the students were behaving, what apps they were accessing, where they were going online, are they being safe? Are we keeping them focused and driving the right behavior, or are they spending all day on TikTok like I did from 1 a.m. to 2 a.m. when I couldn't sleep this morning, right? So we'll cover lots of things today, but again, just know that you are probably not alone in what you're experiencing. And again, as I mentioned, our mission, again, more than just web filtering or more than just MDM or more than just classroom management, is really to protect as many students and make them as effective in the classroom and really to drive learning outcomes around the world. And so to give you an idea, and I was trying to zoom in on this slide earlier so you could just see our customers in Europe, but to give you an idea of how big Lightspeed is, even though it may be a new company to you, there's roughly 21 million students behind our software in 40 countries. And there's 12 to 13 million devices in the system on a given day. And so coincidentally, I make this joke, but it's not really a joke. Most of the places that you see a blue dot on are places I've visited because I love to travel too. So we're hoping we can add a few more pins today after this conversation with you. And who are our clients? So unlike probably most or all of the, I'll call them competitors, but we'll refer to them as other companies you see servicing education clients, where it's MDM or firewalls. Everyone focuses on other markets as their primary source of income. And I think that matters to you. And I say that because if you look at all these different products, we're going to talk about filtering, classroom management, MDM, device management. We're the only ones servicing education 100% of the time. We don't sell to enterprise customers. We don't sell to businesses. We look and say, okay, if you are a school, who are the stakeholders that need features? And that could be you as an IT administrator. It could be you as a head teacher. It could be, now we're starting to see security officers involved in schools, but even the parents, right? And we'll talk about some tools that even give the parents access to control what's happening on the students' devices and getting reports into how they're using. So at the end of the day, you see some large organizations here on there, all the way down to schools that I've spoken with personally that have 50 students, right? And they're struggling with what to do with the mobile devices. So large or small, it doesn't matter to us. The mission is to focus on education. And I'm going to pause for a second just to check the chat. I can only understand about half of it. So I'm going to leave it up to the team to translate for me. If there are questions so far, again, please feel free to stop me at any time. So the solution suite we're talking about today, Lightspeed filtering, I think will be the primary focus and the safeguarding tools around it. But I also want to mention the analytics. Probably those would be the two things. Again, within an hour, it's going to be hard to cover everything. But I think we would do a disservice to you for you to not know that we also have these other integrated solutions, whether it be MDM or classroom management. I think the big thing for us, and I'm assuming a lot of you are heavily invested in the iOS ecosystem. Everything we're going to talk about today does not matter to us. I mentioned we're agnostic when it comes to the devices, right? So, whether it's Chrome, whether it's Windows, Mac, even Android, these solutions will be able to fit in at least some facet with what you're dealing with. And so why this kind of integrated ecosystem matters, and we'll be sure to share this with you afterwards so you can share it with your teams. But what we've found is over the years of doing this, and the company has been around for over 20 years now, and continuing to grow. And as I mentioned, those stats kind of speak for themselves, right? Today, you would probably, to accomplish everything Lightspeed can do, you would have to go buy probably a firewall, a content filter, a mobile device management solution, a geolocation service, what else? An analytics service, a safeguarding tool, and then another parent portal, right? And so if you look in the functionality we'll cover today, it's really, you would probably have to go purchase 5 or 6 different pieces of software to accomplish what we can do, right? And so you see things we've highlighted there, and this is why we've chosen this team to partner with in the region, is because it's one vendor, one contract, helps with your budgets. And again, it's one company to work with, and you can trust that the products are not going to conflict with one another, right? I've seen it too many times where a teacher in the classroom is going to say unblock a website from the classroom management tool, but they're unable to because the firewall or the content filter has a rule against it, right? And so if you have these siloed solutions at schools, it doesn't work, right? Because again, the teacher oftentimes needs to act like the IT administrator in the classroom, right? And we used to think in the classroom, the physical building. Even more important, you have to have tools that are cloud-based over the air to where no matter where the student might be learning from, the coffee shop, maybe the pub, you want them to be able to get control and drive behavior and drive learning outcomes. So it's just important to give the teachers access as it is to make sure the students are getting to the content they need to. So again, this idea of an integrated ecosystem is really key to the solution platform that we have. And so I'll kind of pause here and start with a customer story. And as you can imagine, I don't think I dropped this statistic yet on you, but there's roughly now 6,600 school organizations worldwide that are making up the 20 million students, right? And so we chose one just that Richard and I had worked with previously that I think would probably be similar in size to many of your schools. Again, you'll hear about some customer stories here where we work with entire MOEs, right? And so, but I thought this would be a good mix of predominantly iOS, but now starting to see Chromebooks move in. And I think, Richard, if you're on and care to share some of the story you had working with them, and I know they were coming from kind of legacy hardware-based solution that had one thing for filtering, one thing for MDM. I don't know if you have any insights you'd like to share with the team and how you worked with this particular customer and Susan to get the safeguarding up and running quickly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so we actually worked with Susan and her husband, who's the IT tech at this school.
That's right. Yeah, that can be scary, husband, wife in the same IT room.
Yeah, we went from a very kind of legacy system, not much really going on in terms of management or anything like that, really kind of out there filtering. They couldn't filter the devices when they went home. And they were running into some, significant roadblocks with their setup. And they went from, that zero legacy setup to completely into RMDM, completely into the filter product. Within a matter of a day, really. They went so quick and up and running, and the students have been able to learn from home. And they had a few, I think, problem students that had to have a little bit more reporting on them that they used the filter for, and those devices went home with those students and continued to be filtered, continued to be safeguarded throughout the whole process.
I think that's a key, and again, something we've been very fortunate, and I consider myself fortunate, I think Richard does too, to work for a company that I would say has not been impacted negatively during this pandemic. We've actually been working longer hours because so many schools were saying that, again, like I mentioned earlier, the system I had in place could not protect the students when they went home. And really the parents, to Richard's point, they were asking for help, especially now, because they're almost acting like the teacher and IT administrator at home. And so there was almost this, the stakeholder, the parent, became much more involved with the IT needs, but they also could sleep better at night knowing, okay, I know when this device comes home, it's protected. And today, sometimes your internet service provider or even Apple has some basic tools that they've built into the ecosystem where if you're a tech savvy parent, you could probably go in there and control which apps your child has access to. But sometimes, that's on their personal device. How are you going to manage the institutional device, right? The school-owned device. And so really, and again, we'll see that in the product interface, but this is an example of the immediate need for the school customer was like, oh, I need something to help me when the students are at school during school hours, right? And then it became, well, school hours, switch from 9 to 5. Now it's, where is the device? And so having different policies, which means different rules for different groups of users and depending on location, becomes really key to our school customers that we partner with. So that's a smaller example. And again, I wasn't able to see who all has attended, and I'm not familiar with how large your organizations are, but there may be some of you on here that are a part of consortiums or, again, thinking of the UK, just because we were actually, Richard and I, talking to this particular customer yesterday as they're growing their device deployment, these multi-academy trusts, like I've talked about earlier, different sizes of customers. In the US or, where I'm based, we have school districts that have 500,000 people when you count the students plus the staff, and they've got 400,000 devices. And we work with entire states. And so I think it's just important to know, because I've seen it, a lot of schools will partner with other companies that aren't like Lightspeed, that aren't used to the scale or the growth and cannot grow with you. Now, I'm not saying some of you are going to go from 500 students and a couple hundred iPads to tens of thousands. In some case, we have a state with 1 million devices we're managing overnight. But I think this is the beautiful thing about us being in the cloud, us having cloud services that can work with the devices no matter where they go, because this particular school that you're hopefully reading about here started with, I think, Richard, it was 5,000 Chromebooks. And then they realized, well, we've got tens of thousands of iPads. We need to get the software deployed on those to keep the students safe. And then yesterday we had a conversation. They have another 20,000 Chromebooks that are showing up that they need management with. And the way that the system is, and the team on the call has done the due diligence to see that the product speaks for itself. But the ability to get a device enrolled and get it safeguarded in literally seconds, not an exaggeration, literally seconds, to just get a baseline of safety to make sure students aren't going to inappropriate websites, sites that it could include radicalization, or sites that lend themselves to self-harm, pornographic things. Again, things you just don't want children to have access to, no matter what language you speak or what country you're in, right? And so the ability to just know, okay, I can deploy this software in seconds, and it has a much more enhanced layer of security than it ever has before. Again, this idea of sleeping well at night. And then from there, you can start to do different things. My primary school may have different needs for websites and apps than my secondary school students, right? And so really our customers will deploy the software as quickly as they can to get the safeguarding in place. And then we'll work with you and the local team to say, okay, now, what do you want to accomplish? A great example that I always hear, back to my TikTok obsession, is, okay, we don't want the students on social media between the hours of 9 and 1 o'clock. And then when they go to lunch, we'll let them have access to social media for 30 minutes or an hour. Maybe the same goes for the staff, right? And then after school, say when the school day is done at 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock, we'll let them get to Netflix or Amazon or whatever the case may be. So again, this idea of going in and being able to just customize the needs for your school, for individual users, is key. And then we'll also, and I can't remember if I have a slide in it today, but we'll show it in the product, giving the parents the ability to get reports on what the student's been doing, what they've been accessing, where they've been spending their time online at school or at home, and even some tools to say, okay, I'm going to turn the internet off for an hour or 20 minutes or 30 minutes. And so again, as you're looking at this, lots of products, lots of different use cases, but again, depending on who you are on this call, If you're an IT administrator, we can certainly have a follow-up with you and say, here's how we address your needs. If you're from the curriculum side of the house, we can show you the classroom tools. If you're both sides and you're also a parent, again, there's lots of different tools in this, but again, the goal of the product is to make sure the students are safe on whatever device they are, wherever they are. And I'm gonna pause for a second and ask the team if there's any questions on the filtering and safeguarding so far, things I should dive deeper into. I know we'll get to more of it on the during the product demo, but I wanted to just check on the filtering safeguarding piece before I go to the next section. And I don't, Albert, Sergio, if you think we're okay to move on, let me know, but I'm happy to pause and take questions too. If anyone's still listening. I'm going to check the chat and QA as well, just to make sure we're not. I saw a couple questions in the chat. I saw Albert say hello. Oh, is everyone still okay on audio too, before I keep going? Maybe an Albert could nod yes or no. Richard, you're all good? Thank you. Okay. We'll keep moving on. Hopefully that makes sense for the filtering aspect. And so the beautiful thing about this, and remember the slide from earlier, an integrated solution, right? The safeguarding piece of software can be deployed onto your iPads, your Chromebooks, your Windows devices over the air. Yeah, this is not a technical webinar, but I will kind of address some of the how does it work. iOS, you would push it out through an MDM. You may have something in place today. We could certainly talk to you about alternatives on that front, but Apple, you would push out through your mobile device management solution. If you have Windows devices, also could be an MDM or your SCCM, essentially however you push out MSI files over the air. You would push this agent out, and it's called a smart agent that we call it, this patented technology. Chromebooks, you would use the Google Management Console to push an extension on. Once the agent's been deployed on the devices, as I mentioned, it immediately will start safeguarding the students for some basic stuff, the inappropriate content, the really bad stuff, right? And then you can go in and customize it. Like we gave you a few examples, right, as Richard. The other thing that this software does is what's called analytics. I wish we came up with a better product name because I feel like every company on the planet has analytics. It's all we hear and read about. This analytics, though, that runs on the same software that does the safeguarding, I think is unique, and there's nothing like it in the K-12 market today. You see some of it in enterprise, those of you that may come from that background in Microsoft Power BI, and there's a few other things out there that are really geared towards an enterprise customer, the enterprise needs. Analytics essentially will get loaded onto the device, and it will tell you every single application that's running on the devices, right? So that's the first thing that we're starting to see schools. They've invested in, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of euros in devices, probably also third-party software, your curriculum software, your virtual learning environment, your learning management system, Microsoft Teams, Google Classroom, Apple Classroom, all these different solutions. I thought about putting a poll question in there, but I would bet, and you might not want to admit it, you really have no idea what software is running across those devices. You may have an idea of some applications that have been pushed, but what's to say a teacher hasn't gone to the BET conference that usually is hosted in the Excel Center in London was last week, virtual one. Normally I make the trip across the pond to go to it, go into these work sessions, breakout sessions. Oftentimes there's lots of teachers in there. They find out about a new application. Let's say they come back to their school environment. They'd say, students, we're going to use this application. Well, sometimes the IT department doesn't even know this application's been installed on the devices, right? And so it's not a malicious attempt by the teacher, but what could happen? Where's the student data going? Is this an application we really want to be using? Is this just another redundant tool that we have, right? Because oftentimes they see, hey, we're using Microsoft Teams, we're using Zoom, we're using Google Meet. Let's just standardize on one. And so analytics is able to say, here's all of the applications that are running across all the devices. Let's first get visibility to what's being used. The next thing that we see happen is once I've seen what's visible, I decide, okay, am I going to approve applications or mark them as rejected? And there's some things you can do with the filtering to make sure, okay, I'm going to block these applications because I'm going to drive behavior. Again, most common one I'm seeing lately is we're going to, which is ironic, we're using Zoom today. Look, we invested in Teams, or we invested in Google, or hey, I'm going to give teachers the option to pick Teams or Google. They can use either one of those, but we're not going to use Zoom. And so they'll block Zoom and drive people to these other applications. So that's the first piece of visibility, and then driving behavior with analytics. The next piece of it is from a professional development standpoint. And sorry for the IT guys on here that might not care as much about that, but I'm sure a couple of you come from, again, that curriculum instructional background. Wouldn't it be nice, instead of well, probably not summer, you guys are good about taking your holidays, but in the US as an example, every summer they bring all these teachers into the buildings and say, okay, we're going to train on this piece of software. Everyone's got to do the training. You have to do the training. It's mandatory. Well, the reality is 70%, 80%, who knows, but there's a certain percentage that don't need the training, right? But the school doesn't know how it's being utilized, that piece of software. So they just have to bring everyone in to train, right? So if you think about professional development, wouldn't it be nice to know, say, okay, I know that these 5 classrooms, they're the power users. They use all the curriculum software. Coincidentally, all the grades and learning outcomes are being better. So then I can focus my attention on, okay, it's these 3 teachers that there's just no adoption with the software. Like, what's going on here? So again, think of analytics as my window and visibility tool into what's happening in the classroom and how the apps are being utilized, because then I can take my professional development time and push it to the teachers that need it, right? And even the students that need it. And so that's really the goal of analytics. And then kind of the icing on the cake, so to speak, cherry on top. You also can, if you've really paid for these applications and don't just want to compare free apps, you can put costs associated with the app. And so we'll track it. And so again, I've worked with some large districts in the US where one application at a school district with 20,000 students, they were wasting $1 million a year on one app. $1 million a year. Crazy, right? There's just so much waste in schools. And again, it's not anyone's fault. There's just, you have no baseline. You have no mechanism or reporting engine to show you how things are being used. And so to me, especially during the pandemic, this has been coming in huge for education customers. And the fact that it runs on the same software as the safeguarding piece is really key. And again, you talk about deployments, very easy to get up and running. I'll pause there. I haven't seen anything else in the chat. Questions on analytics before we move on? I really should pay more attention during those high school Spanish classes. I may or may not have copied a few answers on. That was before classroom management solutions. Great, I'll keep moving. At least hopefully my corny jokes are resonating with someone on this call, or else the coffee really hasn't kicked in yet. I'm not going to focus on mobile device management today because I know many of you have a solution in place today. The only thing I will say is there's some benefits of the integration. So if for some reason a current solution isn't working for you, let us know, let the local team know. We're happy to discuss that more with you. I did want to, I don't think it was on the agenda, so I'll probably get yelled at later, but I do want to talk about the classroom management piece, although it's not available for the iPad, because really Apple was designed that more as, again, originally a consumer device, excellent education tool. There's just no, as we say, APIs available to do this. But in my conversations with Microsoft and Google, I know they are putting a big focus on the country. And so I always want to make people aware that we have this classroom management tool. And I thought I saw maybe something in the chat earlier about that. So if you have Windows devices and you have Chromebooks or you have Mac devices, you can use this classroom management tool. The big difference from us and many of the solutions out there, 100% cloud-based and has been for many years. And then also the integration with the filter. And so you can see on the screenshots there, and again, we'll see the live demo here in a few minutes, but that would be a teacher's point of view. So the teacher, no matter where the devices are, could see what's happening on the student screen, make sure they're on task. The teacher can even go into the system and say, okay, right now for the next 15 minutes, I only want you to focus on this one website. And maybe it's for national testing, or maybe the teacher made a YouTube channel with a bunch of content. They don't want the kids focusing on, going to music videos or some other piece of content that's not educational. So the teacher has the ability to control the web browsing of the student on the student device too. So again, if you've got Windows devices in students' hands, Chromebooks, or Mac devices, this is a great solution to help the teachers out, especially during distance and remote learning. And then just kind of summarize the partnership. And again, this is probably reiterating a few things, but the difference for us, and again, I think 100% education focus is probably the biggest one, working closely with local partners, which is the reason we identified this partnership, and also the cloud-based and security. We found that, and this is something that I always tell my school customers that are considering Lightspeed, if you're going to look at other cloud-based solutions for filtering, for safeguarding, even MDM, ask them how they handle the data. Have they taken student data privacy pledges? Are they in a cloud in a basement in someone's house, or is it a trusted partner like AWS or Azure or GCP? And so these are all things, because we're only selling to education, we probably have to take student data privacy more serious than anyone, right? Because we're dealing with 20 million or now 21 million students content and data. And so we have to be very smart about it. And that you see that in the product and the teams. And the other piece of this too is, and we don't do a good enough job of dropping this stat, but it still holds true. I think 30% of the Lightspeed employees, and there's about 150 of us now, are former U's. They're former educators. They were in classrooms. They were network administrators. And so you see that in the product. You see that in customer support. Again, it's just throughout this organization. So to me, enterprise class, yes, true, but really it's education class partnership that matters more for you as school customers. And of course, I got ahead of myself on the slides because much like probably everyone on here, slides can be overkill. And we talked a lot about the company background. So I think with that, we'll come back probably to this price list, and that's easy for you to follow up with the team. But I'm going to pause my screen for a second and pull up the product demo. And a good time for any of you that may have questions or any of the other local team there to feel free to let me know if I should have covered something in more detail. And thank you, Richard, for letting me know no questions at the moment. And yeah, if Zoom is somewhat new to you, double check the in the interface, you should see the chat window there.
Richard here. Whilst Mike's bringing that up, just absolutely feel free to pop any questions you may have in chat. We can keep this, very round table, and I can ping these questions over to Mike and shout them out whilst he's going through it. So please feel free to ask questions.
And I know if everyone is muted by the organizer, feel free to raise your hand. We can also keep it conversational too. Richard, are we able to see the dashboard?
Looks good.
Awesome. I love seeing this streaming live on YouTube. So many followers, going to be trending by tomorrow. Anyways, let's move on for the sake of time, and so everyone can get to lunch there. This would be the filtering, safeguarding, administrative interface. So a couple things to recap on. Cloud-based, we talk about how we would put the software onto the devices. One thing that I think gets overlooked by many schools is how you'll enroll the devices, but also how you get the correct hierarchy structure set up. And what I mean by hierarchy is, how your school is organized today, the classes, the groups, who are the administrators of those groups, right? And so one of the things that we do, there's a few different ways to do it, but if you have, for instance, users in say like Apple Classroom or Active Directory, many schools still utilizing, or O365 or Google Classroom, or even your student information system, many different ways for us to get the data behind the scenes and pull that in to set up the groups, right? And so the goal of that is to, deploy the agents, and from there we'll know who gets what policies. And so we've got large organizations here. And so you may just have one school, but you might be managing multiple schools. So I would basically do this import so you can see all your organizational units, right? And so keep that in mind as we're looking at the different reporting capabilities or the different filtering policies. You can have all of those for different groups of users. And so kind of I'll hit the most popular during the pandemic reports, I would say, and really more often than not, most popular overall. And so one of the big ones is just giving you this idea of visibility, right? Giving you the ability to say what's happening with the students and the devices they're using, right? Whether it's applications or websites they're accessing. And so I would hope more often than not, the top activity is education. Well, if I see education websites and apps are, you know, in a 34% range, that's probably not very good considering the devices are supposed to be used for educational purposes, right? So again, this idea of visibility, what's going on? It may be that social media spiked through the roof. It may be YouTube. So YouTube is probably the most common, right? Because many of you may be allowing it today or trying to block it or something in between. This will show you who's accessing YouTube and when. And why is that important? Because I might find that one of the top videos being accessed is something not appropriate, right? Or not educational. And so I can drill into these reports and quickly see, okay, what the video is. I can watch it if I need to, and who's been watching it. If I decided as an administrator that it's not appropriate, I can block this video on the fly. So this idea of presenting reports to you in real time, but then giving you the ability to take action on them is really key for us. The other thing that schools really like, and again, thinking of this kind of, you saw a macro level overview, right? Here's everything everyone's been trying to access and how they're utilizing the devices. Again, not necessarily trying to find the bad things that are happening, but just making sure kids are on task, they're behaving the right way, and they're focused on education, right? Giving you visibility that you don't have today. Then oftentimes you'll have a teacher or even a parent say, something's going on with my student. We've seen it, unfortunately. You saw some of those statistics. Probably more than ever before, tendencies for self-harm. Kids are depressed. Probably much like us, we're on Zooms all day long, right? And so you're stuck at home, quarantine. You're not able to see your friends. There's a lot going on psychologically, right? And so if you have tools that can kind of identify these trends, it's really key, right? And so being able to quickly say, okay, I need to know what Angie in this case has been doing online, right? Whether they've been at school or at home. Yeah, that we had those kind of macro level reports. Now we're looking at the same thing. Okay, top activities, right? Miscellaneous content they may have accessed. I can drill even further and say, okay, like what sites have they been spending their time on? I can look at sites that they potentially were blocked from too. Excuse me, not potentially, sites they were blocked from. What documents they accessed, YouTube videos. If they were locked out of the internet, which we have tools that I'll show here in a second, if they're trying to go to inappropriate sites, we can pause the internet and give them a warning saying, look, you're off task, you need to focus. And then even some device location included in that as well. And so this idea, again, it's not term that we use here, and I'm sure you've heard it, not the idea to be big brother. The idea is to keep the students on task, make sure they're safe online, and make sure they're focused on educational resources. The other thing we can do here, and I've got, forgive me, using the US version of this site, although I could probably click around it in any language. I've been doing this for so long. One of the things you can do too is we've got this flag terms feature. In flag terms, you can take certain phrases, right? And there's some default ones in here, obviously inappropriate violent terms, but I see so often now, unfortunately, schools having to create their own custom terms, right? I saw this thing last weekend actually on TikTok, again, too many TikTok references, but it was someone reposting that teens are using this phrase. I think it was, I ate spaghetti last night. I saw this. I'm like, what is going on here? And of course, working for a safeguarding company, I said, I'm going to read up on this. And I went down a Reddit rabbit hole of like, apparently kids, sometimes adults, but mostly students, are using that phrase as a way to tell their friends that are depressed and thinking of hurting themselves. And so we saw that and actually looked at the database and like, hey, schools are adding this as a flag term. We added it to the artificial intelligence essentially that's running these scans and these terms. And so you may have things that are impacting your school locally, or certain phrases you're hearing, or again, I hate to focus on the bad, but sometimes you have to, you know, it could be a local gang affiliation. Whatever it is, you can take these terms or phrases that could be customizable to you, drop them into this engine, and anytime those phrases or words come up, it will send you an alert or a guidance counselor or an administrator of your choosing, right? And so again, a proactive approach to safeguarding and the system's always learning, right? So it gets smarter as you add terms, as we add terms, as we work with schools around the world. The engines and software gets smarter. Again, kind of the key is to at least give you visibility into how the student's behaving. I'll pause there and double check chats and questions. Looks like we're okay so far. I can't remember if everyone can come off mute or not. Any questions on the system, the safeguarding aspects of it? Albert, Sergio, anything else that I should highlight from the reporting capabilities before I show the kind of the web controls? I don't see anyone on video, so I can't go off ahead.
I think everything is okay. Like I have been chatting with them, but I think everything is okay. We're gonna move on until the end, and maybe we can just make a quick presentation, a quick end, and just we're gonna reserve all this time just for you, Mike.
Well, thanks, guys. Okay, well, I'll keep going. But if I need to hurry up or stop, please interrupt me. The two more things really I think I want to highlight in the safeguarding piece before we show the analytics which were our two primary focuses today. But you as an administrator, again, sometimes I feel, and again, Richard knows this, we talked about the husband-wife combo in the UK reference earlier. A lot of times filtering and safeguarding and just managing devices in general can seem like a daunting task, especially if you don't come from a technical background. I think, again, us only focus on education, we're in a unique position to where we have to make these things so easy that the teachers can use them in the classroom, or else they won't use the technology, right? You've probably seen it in things you've invested in. So it's one thing to deploy the software very easily that we discussed. Another thing to say, oh, okay, this is nice. Lightspeed's going to serve up these reports for me. They're going to be proactive about safeguarding. But then what do I do about controlling the behavior, right? It's very easy to come in and create rules, and you could have different rules for different groups of users or even different devices if you needed to, right? And so some general things I would come here, probably toggle on if I was a school administrator, right? Forcing safe search, filtering images. I might say, okay, I'm going to enable this feature called lockouts, where if Mike's trying to go to an inappropriate website a certain amount of time, and time frame, a certain amount of seconds, I'll be able to say, okay, I'm going to lock down their internet use like we talked about earlier. We also mentioned in some of those use cases, social media, right? Maybe I decide during school hours, I don't want them to have access to these popular social media apps, and I can add certain social media apps that might not appear on this list, the TikToks and certain things to this as well. And then I can come and create custom categories, and we have a few generic ones here that they're pretty popular with our school customers, but after school or state testing, national testing, if you will. And then we get into the things that you probably don't ever want to allow, right? The mature websites. And again, all these categories are being updated, not by you, by us, right? And so our system, again, think about this big data set we have to go off of. We know when new websites come online, we're able to quickly scan those for inappropriate images, for inappropriate language, and then we push out these updates to the agents that are on your students' devices and sometimes your staff devices to make sure that the websites go to the right categories, right? And so you can ensure that you're not going to have to kind of manually maintain custom allow and block lists based on new websites coming online. Security websites as well. So another layer for, the phishing, the malware sites, again, you would probably never want to have allowed on a school device or in general, but really, and just tons of categories, you could probably spend a few minutes scrolling through here. I want to pause on these education specific ones. So big differentiator for us between, a lot of the firewalls or enterprise solutions that are doing content filtering for schools, and that we're going to differentiate between education games and maybe adult games, or pornographic sites and something that's necessary for sexual education, right? So what you see happening is really unique, and most content filters get a bad name with educators because we block websites, we block resources. The teachers can't get to what they need to. The teachers get frustrated, the students get frustrated, they stop using the technology, they go back to just using the whiteboard. But what we find is when we say, hey, look, just push the software out, allow the education categories to have access and watch, the request to unblock websites will just essentially become zero, right? Because we're always updating the education sites so teachers get to the resources they really need, as do the students, right? So it's really key, seems simple. But most companies, if not all companies, don't really focus on the education like we do. So again, kind of a unique value add for us. I see a couple questions coming in, but it looks like they're getting answered. If I need to come back to those, please let me know. The last piece I want to show, so we've been looking at kind of at what you would have as an administrator, right? The other thing that you can do is create admin roles. And so back to this idea of there's different stakeholders, right, at the school. There's teachers, there's IT, there's the head teacher, there's the finance officer. You're going to have to give reports and information to different groups of users, but you might not want to give them full access to, say, accidentally override a bad website category, right? And so giving everyone the ability to say, okay, I'm going to give a security officer role or a teacher role where they can come in and just see dashboards or just see classroom rules or just handle the MDM. You have this flexibility for those different users. And then speaking of the stakeholders, the last piece I'll show here, and I should have had it preloaded, get it going here in a second, is the ability to give parents some visibility into what's happening as well. And so we can have parent reports sent out on a weekly basis. Say, hey, here's what your student's been doing while they're online. Here's what they have accessed. Again, especially during the pandemic, this went from kind of a nice to have to sometime used to almost, used all the time for schools to help parents get an idea of what the students are doing. And sorry, I just had the chat pop up, making sure I'm addressing everything. And then the other last piece to the parent side is the ability to have a parent portal so the parents can control some of the internet access as well. So we covered, and again, not to get overly technical, we covered how the software is deployed on the school-owned devices, it can be agent-based, and also the ability to address, oftentimes you have devices like smartboards or random Android devices or printers and certain things that are on the network that you're going to have to potentially filter. And so the nice thing is if you're not in a position to push out an agent, let's say, you can virtualize the software as well locally too. So a couple different ways to deploy it. Again, for those of you that hopefully if you've seen some value in the interface itself and the mission of the company and want more details, I know that the local team there will be following up with you to set up evaluations and things on the filtering side as well. And just because we're coming up on time, and to Sergio's point, want to leave some few moments for questions and conversation. Just want to show you the analytics software that also runs on the same smart agent we talked about. This would be the dashboard you can see. And so I think, again, back to recap this particular product and the value of it, you've purchased devices, you've probably purchased software, you need visibility into how that software is being utilized. This would be where you would come to see how it's using. So as I mentioned, we would identify applications that are running across all the devices, and you can decide if you want to track those applications or not. So if I find a piece of software I wanted to start tracking, I would come here and say, okay, I'm going to decide if it's paid versus free, a cost associated with those, a renewal date for that software, and then it will start populating these reports throughout the interface. And so now I get a real breakdown of not only utilization of the application, but costs associated with that, right? And so if there's potentially unused licenses, I'm going to see that here. So again, probably something you don't have visibility into today, I would bet. You probably have the ability through sometimes MDM or say the management console to say, well, here's a list of apps that I've deployed, but that doesn't necessarily tell you which apps are on the devices, right? Or which web-based apps that the students might be using or staff. So again, just another way to get visibility into how software is being used and really how devices are being used. And you can drill down from the entire school organization down to a group of classes, all the way down to an individual classroom like we talked about earlier. So again, you see this sort of macro level report to see everything happening across the organization in both the filtering analytics, even the classroom management piece, and then drilling down all the way to a student and staff. So in this case, Ms. Tompkins, which again, as I said earlier, I may see that, wait, everyone's actually using Achieve 3000 or pick your favorite application, but it's just a couple classes that have low utilization and adoption. So let's go in there, let's get the students and staff trained up on the software and make sure they're utilizing it. So that's really the goal of the analytics module. I'll pause there to see if there's any questions. I haven't seen many coming through the chat on this one. Okay, oh, maybe one. Oh, thanks, Richard. I actually got the chat window up so I can see it too now. Last piece, just for those of you that may have something other than an iOS device. Again, as we talked about earlier, Windows, Chrome, or even Macs, classroom management's a great tool to have on there. Again, this would be a teacher's view. So I can see what the students are currently browsing. We've talked about Angie Gables earlier. If I saw Angie was on something, maybe not inappropriate, maybe in this case, inappropriate, it probably shouldn't be trying to play poker during Miss Tompkins' class. I can see that they were blocked. I can close this tab if I need to, and I can get the student's browsing history as well. Not in my particular demo because the live site is on my computer here and obviously slowing down because of the Zoom. I can see recordings as well. I can share the screen. I can lock the screen, recordings, and even share messaging or even custom messaging with the student as well. So it gives the teachers a way to interact with the students. Again, usually that would be in a physical classroom, but now, especially with distance learning happening in so many schools in so many countries, still a need to kind of have this real-time interaction, as well as driving behavior, right? I mentioned this example earlier. So a teacher may say, okay, I need you focused on just this website. They would drop the URL in here. Or I might say, okay, I, as a teacher, you have to do research on this particular subject. I'm going to block Wikipedia and YouTube. You've got to find another source online, right? So a couple different examples that we see teachers utilizing classroom management for on those devices we have covered. And that's the Lightspeed platform. I see we've got a couple good questions coming in. Richard's addressing those, but I want to go ahead and address some of them from the group as they're coming in because not everyone may have the chat up. The question was, in terms of security, does the software block content according to blacklists of web pages or families of content? Richard said both. I probably did a poor job of explaining that. So when I was talking about those categories of websites, right? It's probably not the best term nowadays, but typical American terminology. We have an army of servers. Probably strike that from the YouTube live recording later. But essentially, we have servers and technology and AI that's going out and looking at new websites, looking at all the websites, right, and differentiating between things like on CNN, the word bomb, or BBC, bomb, violent, knife. All these things, again, news site, probably not inappropriate, but we're still scanning it, right? Then there's sites that are actively promoting that sort of violence, right? And so we'll differentiate between those and put them in different categories. So the idea of going out and proactively scanning the internet for new websites and content, and even, for those of you, say, using Chromebooks in a Google Doc, right? Unfortunately, the students are going in there and bullying each other or using violent terms. The system's going out and scanning that content and then adding it to the database and reporting on it. And so really, the idea of you having to make those custom block lists or custom web lists, like that goes away. Now there'll still be needs for it, right? You may have a local application or local website that you want to make sure always has access to. That can certainly be categorized differently. So that's a good question. But yeah, the most of the work is done for you in this case when it comes to the safeguarding piece. Other questions? Albert, Sergio, I'll probably kick it back to you then.
I think, Mike, you was too much clear. And anyone have any question?
I doubt that. I probably talk way too fast because I'm 2 cups of coffee in, but I just get excited, guys. Sorry. Yeah, I think as we talked about before the call, and everyone that joined today, again, hopefully it's you've picked up on the fact and heard it from Richard. Only selling to schools. We're fortunate to do it. Extra fortunate to be in multiple time zones and fortunate to have things like Zoom to be able to communicate with you. I just need Zoom to start doing translations for me. But we're 100% dedicated to education. I think, we covered a lot. There's probably going to be some technical questions. We're happy to follow up with you and schedule, one-on-one demos. Again, we'll bring our translators, but at the end of the day, you probably sit in on a lot of PowerPoints, see a lot of presentations. We are more than happy to give you access to the software for trial licenses, because at the end of the day, I think the software will speak for itself. More often than not, schools that deploy the software, you immediately see things that we're catching and blocking that were probably being accessed prior to. And then same for, the analytics function, right? You start to say, oh my gosh, I didn't even know these applications were being run. Like, what is this application? Where's the data going? And so, again, even if you just ran this is where you should stop the recording because I'll get in trouble. Even if you just ran the software, didn't buy it from me, you'd get value from it, right? Just run it for a few weeks, getting visibility. So, but I'm pretty confident that after you see the value, it's worth, partnering with us too. So, if there are more questions, I know we have a couple minutes. If not, we can end early and you can get the lunch and I can go have breakfast.
Mike, I go to make a presentation on myself. In this case, I change to Spanish, maybe for the assistants, it's maybe faster. But thanks to your presentation in the part of the demo, working with Richard Crown, in this case, from the technical area, I changed to Spanish only to ask maybe if all that we show is clarified and what is the situation with MicroST offering this solution. Okay?
Perfect. I'll go on mute then until you...
Okay. Buen día, buenos días. Entiendo que me estáis oyendo todos. Como les indicaba, primero agradecer a Mike Durango y a Richard Crown de la parte técnica la presentación más de producto. Y un poco queríamos expresaros, pues bueno, antes de nada agradecer haber podido asistir por vuestra parte, que sabemos todos cómo estamos a nivel de disponibilidad, entendiendo de que creemos que os podemos aportar con una solución como la de Lightspeed y todo su portfolio de solución, todo y que nos hemos centrado más en la parte de filter, algo que complemente lo que las escuelas o los centros ahora mismo tenemos, ¿no? Nos hemos centrado más en la protección perimetral, o sea, poner barreras dentro de la escuela y evitar que los estudiantes puedan acceder a contenidos que no toca, pues a través de las redes y de los firewalls. Pero bueno, creo que la pandemia nos ha mostrado a todos que esas barreras pues, se rompen rápidamente, ¿no? Y cuando tenemos a los estudiantes desplazados del centro educativo, pues lógicamente perdemos toda la visibilidad y sigue siendo un reto importante. De ahí un poco que desde MicroST llevábamos ya bastante tiempo intentando buscar una solución que complementase el portfolio de las soluciones educativas. Y creemos que con Lightspeed, pues no solo la parte del filter, sino las otras herramientas como la parte de Analytics, pues pueden ayudar a mejorar esa visibilidad que ahora mismo, pues bueno, en muchos casos no tenemos, ¿vale? He preferido saltar a castellano, como en catalán si fuese la necesidad, porque todos sois de aquí, pero un poco para facilitar quizás, ¿no? Que si tenemos necesidad de expresar o consultar algo, aprovechando que están Mike y Richard, y si no, pues estará a vuestra disposición para cualquier otra duda que os podamos responder, tanto del área comercial como del área técnica, ¿eh? Si os es más fácil y queréis abrir los micros, no hay problema, ¿eh? O sea, está preguntando uno de los participantes si tiene sincronización con ASM, con el Apple School Manager. Como ha indicado Mike, se sincroniza y se conecta con soluciones de directorio activo. De hecho, un poco esto viene dado porque, de hecho, también Apple School Manager, su idea es que se federe o se sincronice con estos directorios activos. O sea, School Manager no deja de ser una herramienta más que da conectividad con la parte de creación de Apple IDs, ¿vale? Con lo que en este caso, su idea es que tengamos un directorio activo y además empiezan a haber soluciones de directorio activo en la nube, como los propios de Microsoft con Azure o otras plataformas como Okta, que pueden integrarse posteriormente tanto con la ASM como con plataformas como Lightspeed. No sé si hay alguna pregunta más. Sergio, no sé si querías quizás hacer un poco de posicionamiento también a veces de producto a nivel licenciamiento, un poco para que la gente, los asistentes tengan una referencia de qué estamos hablando en este caso.
Sí, bueno, en este caso, gracias Albert por la intervención. Evidentemente el chat sigue abierto por si tenéis cualquiera de vosotros cualquier duda y como bien dice Albert, pues aprovechar ahora que está Mike y Richard, que bueno, que evidentemente tendremos línea directa con ellos, pero ya que los tenemos hoy aquí, pues evidentemente cualquier duda, cualquier cosa más técnica, pues nos pueden echar un cable. Y como bien decías, Albert, también, pues el tema del licenciamiento, pues aquí la verdad que es muy simple. Es algo parecido a los que evidentemente ya tenéis todos un MDM, ya sabéis que en este caso se paga una licencia anual por cada uno de los dispositivos que vienen vinculados al mismo, y aquí es muy similar. Aquí en este caso estamos hablando de un precio de 5 euros al año por cada una de las licencias, en este caso. Y aquí sí que tenemos una posibilidad de hacer el licenciamiento a 3 años y saldría a 12 euros. De esta manera podríamos, bueno, pues evidentemente ya dejar el parque cerrado. Y lo que estamos buscando también, y un poco pues también Lightspeed está interesado, es en pues iniciar este tipo de trials con diferentes centros para evidentemente ir pues mejorando y viendo cómo se adapta el mercado español pues a este producto, que realmente creemos que va a dar como decía Albert, pues un paso adelante y nos va a permitir pues asegurar los dispositivos no solo dentro del cole, sino fuera del mismo. No sé si alguien más tiene alguna pregunta o queréis añadir alguna cosita. Mike ahora me está echando un cable pasando la presentación a la parte de los precios, que es lo que os comentaba. Thank you, Mike. Bueno, pues si no tenéis más preguntas, como os comentábamos todos, pues a daros las gracias por la asistencia, por invertir una horita de vuestro tiempo en nosotros. Dar las gracias también a Mike y a Richard por, en este caso, pues el madrugón que se han dado para estar presentes hoy aquí a las 12. Y nada, y a partir de aquí, pues evidentemente tenéis nuestros contactos para cualquiera de vosotros, de los asistentes, que pues si tenéis cualquier duda, si queréis ya empezar a ver cómo se podría adaptar este producto a vuestro centro, pues evidentemente tenéis nuestros contactos para hacernos una llamada, escribirnos un mail y a partir de aquí pues poder ir a vuestro centro y hacer una demo personalizada y poder ir adelante con este producto. Nada, Mike, no sé si quieres despedirte, if you wanna say goodbye to our customers or say something.
I will. Just coming off mute. I was the reason it took me so long to bring up the price list is because I was going through my Google Photos, looking at my last trip to Barca. So I was daydreaming over here very early in the morning, thinking about cervezas and siestas. You guys are closer to your weekend than I am, so hopefully you go enjoy some. Hopefully you got something out of this today. Again, appreciate very much the time. I hope we have the opportunity to partner with all of you very soon in some form or fashion. And thanks everyone for having us today. So talk soon, I hope.
Albert, no sé si vols afegir alguna coseta o simplement despedir-te.
No, jo en principi per part meva deixar-ho obert, tenim tots els contactes, o sigui que si hi ha alguna necessitat totalment oberts a que contactem i puguem establir el que dèiem, no? Si s'ha de fer alguna presentació més concreta amb alguna d'aquestes escoles o algun projecte, doncs ho anem tractant individualment. Moltes gràcies a tots.
Moltes gràcies a tu, Albert, que, com deien, des del departament tècnic portàvem molt de temps provant aquesta solució i ara ja creiem que és el moment de tirar-la endavant i esperem que ens aporti molts èxits tant a Lightspeed com a microgestió i, evidentment, que ajudi a les escoles, que és l'objectiu, i que ajudi els centres educatius a poder garantir el contingut de tots els dispositius, que, com veieu, aquesta és una eina multiplataforma, per tant, de qualsevol dispositiu que estigui dintre l'escola o que estigui a mans d'un alumne. Res, moltíssimes gràcies. Des de Microgestió és un plaer anar fent aquests webinars, que cada vegada estem fent de més i com tots, la pandèmia també ens ha fet reciclar i aprofitar, evidentment, que el medi online ens permet arribar a tothom, a totes parts, i estarem encantats, com si alguna vegada teniu alguna idea de fer algun webinar i estarem encantats d'escoltar les idees que ens vinguin des de fora. Per tant, oberts completament a vosaltres, a les escoles, i des de Microgestió, com sempre diem, és un plaer poder fer aquest tipus d'esdeveniments i qualsevol coseta ens podeu escriure com vulgueu. Que vagi molt bé i que tingueu molt bon dia.
Perfecte, gràcies a tots. Mike, Richard,
Adéu.
thanks.
Thanks very much, everyone.